Lots to talk about. Let's get straight to our panel. Faisel Pervaiz joins us from Austin, Texas. He's a South Asia analyst with Stratfor. Joining us from Detroit, Michigan, Saeed Khan is a lecturer at the Department of Near East and Asian Studies at Wayne State University. Joining us here in Washington in our studio, Omar Samad is non-resident senior fellow at the South Asia Center at the Atlantic Council. He also served as Afghan Ambassador to France and Canada. And Jonathan Wachtel joins us from New York. He's former Director of Communications and spokesperson at the United States Mission to the United Nations. Welcome to all of you to the show. Faisel Pervaiz, let me start with you. Prime Minister Imran Khan is here on a 3-day visit. It's his first visit to the country as Prime Minister. In fact, he's only been in office for a short time, less than a year, about 11 months. And a lot on his plate: Afghanistan, the Pakistan economy, terrorism, relationship with India, the issue over Kashmir. What would he be hoping to achieve with this visit?
Khan wants to turn the page with Trump. As you pointed out earlier, there has been incredible acrimony in the relationship. After all, Trump's first tweet of 2018 was a castigation against Pakistan for, quote, lies and deceit. And Khan himself has made the statement that Pakistan does not want to be on bad terms with the most powerful country in the world. So Khan is really hoping that they can strike up some sort of a personal chemistry and that they can establish a better relationship. And finally, Khan also would hope that the relationship can broaden beyond its traditional security focus to also include opportunities in trade and investment.
Saeed Khan, what's your view on this? No doubt part of this visit will be this fence-mending mission to restore trust after the United States cut aid to Pakistan amid those accusations that Pakistan was helping terrorists in the region and not doing enough to combat terrorism. Looking at the optics of Monday's joint press conference, which took place in the Oval Office, do you think the Prime Minister has succeeded in regaining the confidence of American leaders?
Well, I think optics is the critical word here, that it didn't begin just with today's meeting in the Oval Office. There was this rally yesterday in Washington where Prime Minister Khan addressed something like 20,000 to 30,000 Pakistani Americans. This is something that would appeal to American leaders and policymakers to demonstrate that this is a popular leader of Pakistan after a series of rather wobbly statesmen and stateswomen that have come through the country. It is, as Faisel said, turning a new page with a prospect that there can be a reset of a relationship between Washington and Islamabad, something which has been fractious. Now, on the side of the Pakistanis, they will contend that it has actually been the United States that has been much more mercurial. The Pakistanis, given their resources or their limited resources, they have been trying to tread water now for quite a bit of time. On the issue of Afghanistan, while President Trump is right to say that the United States has been there for nearly 20 years, Pakistan has in some way, shape, or form been involved for 40 years. So I think it's going to be a time for reminding both sides what has been the longer relationship between these two, and then moving ahead to see what the future holds in place for both of them.
Ambassador, the war in Afghanistan at the top of the agenda for these talks that are taking place in Washington right now. Let's listen to what the two leaders said about that. Let's watch this.
We're working with Pakistan and others to extricate ourselves, nor do we want to be policemen, because basically we're policemen right now. And we're not supposed to be policemen. We've been there for 19 years in Afghanistan. It's ridiculous.
I feel, and I think we will discuss this, it's the closest we have been to a peace deal. And we hope that in the coming days, we will be able to urge the Taliban to speak to the Afghan government and come to a settlement, a political solution.
Do you share that optimism there, closest to a deal right now?
Well, from a certain perspective, yes. Everybody is closer to some type of settlement. Now, what this deal will look like, what it will entail, what the details are, obviously, are being worked out. It's not final. There are different pillars to this deal. There's the counterterrorism pillar. There's the American NATO withdrawal timetable pillar. There's the one about the intra-Afghan process that could lead to power sharing or some type of new arrangement, politically speaking, in Afghanistan. And there's the ceasefire, obviously, that glues everything. So they obviously are interlinked. And it's you know, optics and rhetoric aside, there are some very serious issues that have to be dealt with. And I think that over the next day or two, we will see what will transpire, to what extent will Pakistan play ball. I don't think that the page has already been totally turned yet. I think that it's in the process of being turned, and Afghanistan will play an important role in what Pakistan will do or not do from now on will also play a very important role.
And Ambassador, what role does Pakistan play in this process? Does Pakistan and the United States share the same goals as far as Afghanistan is concerned?
Well, if you look at history, whether it's the last 20 years or the last 40 years, as was mentioned earlier, there are times when they have shared the goals, including with Afghans, and there are times where they really haven't. And we still are not on the same page totally. But Pakistan has, to some extent, obviously played a constructive role in the past few months. It remains to be seen what else it can do, because there are a lot of moving parts to this very complex process that is being worked on by Ambassador Khalilzad and many others.
Right.
What the Taliban are willing to do and can do is one part of it, and what happens in Kabul is another part, because the Afghan political setup also has to, in one way or another, come to some kind of a consensus on the way forward.
All right, let me bring in Jonathan from New York. And Jonathan, what would the United States want out of this visit?
The United States would really want to see actions follow the at least positive words coming from Prime Minister Khan. And if you don't see any sort of positive action, and that means Pakistan fully cooperating in this peace process, it's wonderful that the Pakistanis are involved and that there is headway to try to put an end to this horrible, almost 2-decade-long conflict for the United States. But it has been, as the other guests have said, a very difficult relationship between the two countries. We had a situation in which Osama bin Laden, our arch enemy in the United States, was harboring within Pakistan. Very difficult to find him. Ultimately found him with the assistance of a doctor who's now imprisoned in Pakistan. You have the issues long-standing over the nuclear issue within Pakistan, in which A.Q. Khan, the grandfather of Pakistan's nuclear program, was out selling Pakistan's nuclear technology to outside countries. And then you have this issue of Pakistan itself in relationship to Afghanistan that has played a rather dubious role up till now. All these things really have to be scrutinized, and there are high hopes that Ambassador Khalilzad and the rest of the negotiators who are holding these talks in Qatar are going to be able to pull something off in terms of Afghanistan. But Afghanistan is just one of the various issues that I've raised.
Faisel Pervaiz, listening to Jonathan telling us about the difficulties of this process, if the United States is going to be looking for action from Pakistan, what can Prime Minister Imran Khan do in the short term?
Push the Taliban to an agreement to start talks with the Afghan government. As Ambassador Omar noted, this is a very complex process, and in my view, the most difficult part of implementing any peace deal will be what are the intra-Afghan talks. Because since October, there have been 7 rounds of talks between the U.S. and the Taliban, and in every single round, the Taliban have not allowed the government of President Ashraf Ghani to participate because they view that as an illegitimate government. So Trump is really counting on Khan to use the country's leverage over the Taliban, which is still residing in Pakistani territory, to go and start those talks.
So, Ambassador, Pakistan can use its influence to basically talk to the Taliban. Who talks to the Afghan government to get them to enter talks?
So the intra-Afghan process obviously involves the Taliban, and the hope is that they would join the rest of the Afghan political setup, the post-2001, post-9/11 setup that includes the government. It's not just the government of President Ghani, it's the state, it's the establishment as a whole, the political establishment. They would have to agree to talk. Now, they have already started talking to some elements of Afghan political society and communities and various power brokers in Afghanistan. And that is a good step. It hasn't yet turned into a full-fledged intra-Afghan process, and that has to be worked on. Now, the other part obviously has to do with concerns that exist about the future of the role the Taliban will play in countering terrorism, and in not only reducing violence in Afghanistan, against the Afghan people and the Afghan state, but also on how to make sure that the international community is on board and accepts Taliban assurances. And this is where Pakistan needs to play a role. And I think that today in the White House statement, it was very clearly stated that it expects Pakistan to make sure that once and for all, that's the term they use, once and for all, they shut down the terrorist networks that exist on Pakistani soil.
Saeed Khan, listening to Jonathan Wachtel there a moment ago, he catalogued a whole list of differences that the United States has had with Pakistan. He mentioned the doctor who helped with the capture and the killing of the Al-Qaeda leader. He mentioned A.Q. Khan's nuclear program and the help he gave to other countries. So clearly, both sides would have to build a lot of confidence to move this relationship forward. Can they get past their differences?
It's possible. I think what we see and the statements that we heard today in the Oval Office really demonstrate a return to realpolitik. The idea that the Trump administration recognizes the limitations of what Pakistan can do, and similarly, Prime Minister Khan recognizing exactly what are the parameters of the relationship that the United States wants to have with Pakistan, as well as with some of its regional allies and also emerging allies, including India. Now, confidence building measures have been underway. Some might dismiss these as being merely optical, but I think it's very important to recognize that Washington has designated the Balochistan Liberation Army on its terrorist list, as well as more recently Prime Minister Khan arresting Hafiz Saeed, who of course has been implicated in the 2008 Mumbai bombings. So these are going to present at least some deliverables that can be then taken to the respective governments and said, yes, these are steps and measures that are underway by each respective government as a result of a rather transactional relationship that seems to be between these two governments that does have some substance to it.
Jonathan, we've been talking about what Pakistan needs to do to resolve the situation in Afghanistan, to bring that war to an end. But what can the United States do? Is President Trump prepared to push the Afghan government to start these talks with the Taliban?
I think what the president said today about how he wants to avoid more casualties to put an end to this war and the United States' role in it has cost so much financial expenditure, certainly, and human treasure in terms of American GIs, in terms of actually a lot of Western and others participating in NATO's efforts to put an end to this conflict. Certainly there is, positive steps that the president can take. I think the president welcoming the prime minister at the White House today was very good. The invitation is very good. The desire to have a dialogue rather than to let things drift in a way that is unconstructive here when really you do need the dialogue, you do need the full engagement. I think putting Ambassador Khalilzad, empowering him to negotiate, and Khalilzad's been busy at that, trying to make this happen. I think even the United States' position to allow dialogue with the Taliban itself, which is, let's face it, in many ways a major terrorist organization. And I think also in terms of welcoming Pakistan's spy chief today into the White House, and it's part of the discussion. These are all positive moves, at least a sign that the United States is willing to engage and try to work out an end to this terrible conflict at a time when really the world needs more stability in that region than ever before, arguably.
Faisel Pervaiz, Jonathan there mentioned the spy chief, the Pakistani spy chief being at the White House as well. In fact, the Pakistan newspaper Dawn described that as quite odd, the fact that Imran Khan is accompanied on this visit by Pakistan spy chief as well as the army chief. The newspaper said this may be one of the rare occasions where a head of government is accompanied by the country's army chief in a meeting with the United States president. What do we read into that?
Well, that editorial we're referring to also made the point about the optics, and in my opinion, this is Khan also trying to show that in Pakistan, the powerful military and the government are on the same page. Now, one does not need to look very far back into Pakistan's history to see the tumultuous relationship between the military and the politicians. So this is Khan trying to A, send that signal that we are on the same page, and B, there is a clear understanding within Washington that the Afghan policy in Pakistan is very much influenced by the military. So it makes perfect sense for Khan to bring the army and spy chiefs on board with the visit.
Saeed Khan, let's move on to one of Imran Khan's other big goals, and that is getting economic help for Pakistan. This is what President Trump had to say. Let's watch.
We were paying $1.3 billion to Pakistan as aid, working for many years. The problem was Pakistan, this is before you, Pakistan was not doing anything for us. They were really, I think, subversive. They were going against us. And this is something we'll be I ended that about a year and a half ago, the $1.3 billion. And I'll tell you what, to be honest, I think we have a better relationship with Pakistan right now than we did when we were paying that money. But all of that can come back.
So the president says a better relationship, but how difficult is it going to be for Prime Minister Imran Khan to get that aid restored?
Well, first of all, let's go ahead and put some perspective to $1.3 billion, which President Trump suspended. That was the cost of construction of the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. So really, it's not an awful lot of money. Second of all, Pakistan has received aid from the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar to the tune of $10 billion. There's a $60 billion investment package with China long term. When it comes to aid for the United States to Pakistan, I'm not sure how much Imran Khan is necessarily relying upon receiving that. He's perhaps more interested in seeing if the United States will exert influence on the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and the Asia Bank to go ahead and provide aid packages to it. And there was a positive meeting between Prime Minister Khan today and the acting director of the International Monetary Fund, David Lipton, in which Director Lipton said that Pakistan needs to mobilize its domestic tax revenues, as well as provide some kind of schematic for how to handle its debt repayment. Those are not unreasonable demands from the IMF to go ahead and ask. And as a result of it, it probably sends a signal back to the Trump administration that it can then go ahead and relax some of its oppositions to the IMF providing aid to Pakistan.
Ambassador, you've been a diplomat for a long time. How big are the stakes here for Pakistan and for Prime Minister Imran Khan? I've looked at some reports and some commentators are looking at this very positively. They point to the fact that both these leaders have a lot in common. They refer to their personal styles and their personal politics. Does that help?
It might. Chemistry at times helps between leaders in the diplomacy, but I think that the stakes are so high, the stakes are so serious. This war issue, war and peace issue, the future of the economy in Pakistan itself, regional connectivity, the fact that there are other countries in the region that are doing very well economically speaking, and others that are not. Poverty issues, debt issues, there are a lot of issues that obviously play into this. And so I think that this visit might help. But from an Afghan perspective, obviously Afghanistan is not only looking for peace, a just and durable peace, and one that will stop the threats that have hurt the region and Afghanistan. And those threats are very clear. They're terrorism and violence and extremism. And so we also know where they came from, and we also know what the sources are. So we need to, again, as the Americans said today, we need to put a stop to the outsourcing of violence and terrorism. At the same time, we need to work together towards a better future and better economic prospects and more regional interconnectivity, all the way from China going through the Middle East and into Europe. And you see that there is an eagerness to do so. This is an opportunity, in my opinion. I hope they seize it, but I hope that we are not going to see the repeat of what we have seen over the last 3 or 4 decades, which is Pakistan saying one thing, doing something else, or playing, as some people say, a double game. I hope that they will put a stop to that kind of an approach.
Let me get Faisel's view on that. Faisel Pervaiz, is this going to be a game changer, this meeting?
Well, like Ambassador Omar said, there is a decades-long history here, so certainly we cannot expect a single meeting to create a monumental change. However, change does begin with a single step. And for Pakistan and the United States, the stakes are incredibly high. This conflict has gone on for a very long time. So if both of these leaders really can establish a rapport, a chemistry, and agree on a direction where there can be real tangible cooperation, that is significant.
Jonathan, there was an interesting Financial Times analysis on this meeting today in which it quoted an analyst from India saying that the United States is using a carrot and stick approach with Pakistan in order to put Imran Khan under pressure to deliver. In the words of the analyst, this is, quote, a tactical rapprochement, a marriage of convenience of a kind, or a coming together of convenience. Do you agree with that?
To a degree, I suppose you could say that. You know, Pakistan, I've been there, and it's an amazingly environmentally beautiful, rich country in so many ways, and a disaster economically because of the dangers there, because of the terrorism, because of the threats, because it's got a terrible reputation internationally. And this is indeed an opportunity for the country now at the helm happens to be this celebrity, amazing cricketer, famous worldwide, actually educated in Oxford, very astute fellow, very impressive individual who's now interacting with the U.S. president and able to perhaps pull his country out of this terrible situation it's been in for decades. So, you know, I do think it's an opportunity for the United States to offer an opportunity for Pakistan to crawl out of this ridiculous space it's been in, to be able to come into the fold as a responsible country and shed this reputation of being a bad actor and at least a passive actor in trying to combat terrorism. And a chance for Pakistan to try to impress the United States and try to muscle its way in a way in terms of visibility that now India enjoys with the United States. Right. So there's a mutual opportunity here for both countries, for the United States to try to put an end to the Afghan conflict, to try to curtail terrorism, and a chance for Imran Khan to actually bring his nation into a proper place.
Saeed Khan, as we've just heard, these are very complex issues, intricate issues that depend on so many other parties as well. But do you expect any significant breakthroughs with this meeting? As Faisal pointed out, it's a first step, but does it set the right tone and is it going in the right direction?
I agree with Faisal. I think it definitely sets the right tone, but as oftentimes happens when examining some of the regional issues, is that all the various parties are not at the table at the same time for a real multilateral and comprehensive approach. The United States is now engaged, Pakistan is engaged, Afghanistan will be engaged, but India needs to be involved, China needs to be involved, and perhaps even Iran needs to be involved. There are a lot of moving parts when it comes to these situations.
And of course, Afghanistan needs to be there too.
Oh, I mentioned Afghanistan right after Pakistan. Right. But I think it's also important to recognize that agency is perhaps the critical issue here. For really since its inception 72 years ago, Pakistan has really been at the crucible of the Cold War, the post-Cold War, the global war on terror, and now this latest dimension of geostrategic interests of other parties and other countries, both regionally and internationally. So to go ahead then and to impugn Pakistan as simply being a bad actor is unhelpful when understanding really what have been the moving parts that have brought Pakistan to its current conformation.
Right. And that's where we have to leave it. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.